Welcome, everyone. This is Doug Fink, and I host the PowerShell New York City PowerShell group. And tonight, we're looking forward to Heiko from ScriptRunner. He's going to talk to us about his product he's been on before, and he's going to talk about some updates and all the cool things the product does. Before we get going, just want to do a little housekeeping. Next month, we have Alan Forbes, who's going to talk about PowerScripts, how to execute better, another product that you can look at doing stuff for Office 365. That'll be next month, so it'll be a good time to join. And just want to bring your attention to, I have a YouTube channel, and I post the videos, like the recording that we're doing tonight. I post them up here. I will put that in the chat. You can get on, click that link, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Not only do I post the meetup videos, but I also do videos on PowerShell and other types of technology that I post. So as I post those things, if you're subscribed and have the notification bell button hit, you'll get notified when I do that. So with that, so I'll let Heiko introduce himself, and feel free to type questions in the chat, and we'll get those answered. And let's have looking forward to this presentation. So Heiko, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm awesome, actually. I'm quite excited to be in the session today and to be able to talk about our ScriptRunner solution. And yeah, I think we have quite some interesting stuff to cover. And at the end of the session, we're also going to have we're going to give away 2 Amazon gift cards. So I'm going to ask 2 silly questions, and whoever's going to answer the first with the right question, with the right answer, of course, will win a $50 Amazon gift card. So yeah, and as Doug said, my name is Heiko. I'm with ScriptRunner. I'm in the IT industry for 25 plus years. Did all kinds of things, started with administration, consulting, product management, stuff like that. And for 3 years and a little bit more, I'm now with ScriptRunner. And I want to, in this session, just show you and talk about why ScriptRunner can help you to, as the session title states, unlock the power of PowerShell across your organization. I will start with a few slides at the beginning. So I will start and try to share my screen here. And then very quickly, we will move to my environment and take a look at the different possibilities, the things that you can do with ScriptRunner. And yeah, I guess that's going to be then the even more interesting part. So yeah, ScriptRunner, we are a company who's been around since 2014. So, and our goal is to simplify the way you basically develop, manage, and delegate your PowerShell scripts. So as I said, we are based in Germany. We've been around since 2014. At the moment, we are about 24 people. You see in the background, we try to line up in like the PowerShell sign. Maybe you can see it still. And another number here, we have about 1,600 something scripts on our GitHub repo, ready to use PowerShell scripts for all kinds of platforms that can help you to maybe start using PowerShell or to get some inspiration about things that you can do with PowerShell. And I will show you an example because later on, because most of the stuff that I will show you are based on the scripts. And yeah, so we are really also into community, into helping people working with PowerShell. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, and I will also paste the contact information into the chat later on. You can get in touch with me via LinkedIn, GitHub, Twitter, of course. And if you're into music, which is one of my main passions besides PowerShell and automation, there's a little YouTube channel where I have 16 videos and I think 17 followers, which is an interesting balance, but maybe you're interested because, for example, I did a little video when for last year's 15 years PowerShell anniversary. So maybe you're interested in looking at that as well, if you're brave enough. And talking about supporting the PowerShell community, we have a whole bunch of goodies around PowerShell. We have a poster that can help you in your day-to-day business. We have a PowerShell security ebook. We have a Teams cheat sheet for PowerShell and one for Exchange. And I think that might be a good time to paste in this links into the chat when I find the window here, which is right here. So you might be interested in that. So all the things that can really help you with working with PowerShell on a daily business, and especially the poster, something that you could put on your office wall. So of course, people say you have get help, of course. So this is kind of the get help for your office wall, and it's really a helpful thing. It shows you a lot of the frequently used commandlets and how the pipeline works and stuff like that. All right, so with this, so what are we doing actually, and what are the things that I'm going to show you? So the overall idea of ScriptRunner is to take PowerShell and to enable you to standardize, automate, and delegate all kinds of recurring tasks, running scripts interactively, scheduled or event-driven via a REST API or other methods, provide you and offer you a comprehensive monitoring and reporting engine that allows you to see what kind of PowerShell activities happen in your organization, which script ran at what time, who triggered it, stuff like that. And the way that we do that, and these are the things that I'm going to show you, of course, is we're centralizing the scripts and the module management. So you can have all your scripts in a central place. Of course, you can sync it with Git and stuff like that. We also have a secure credential management solution, which I'm also going to show you in more detail later on. And last but not least, we have a possibility to automatically create a user-friendly web form automatically from each of your PowerShell scripts. So we're looking into your scripts and translate that into a web input form, basically. And so the reason why we're doing that and why organizations start using PowerShell together with ScriptRunner is that, I name it here 2 ways of using PowerShell. So quite often we see organizations that have like a huge amount or maybe a small amount of scripts somewhere on OneDrive, in emails, in network shares or whatever. And the people who wrote the scripts, they typically know where to go to find the script, to create a new VM or to start an onboarding process or to create a new user in Active Directory or creating new teams and whatever the use case might be. And that's fine, of course, for starting using PowerShell. But then if you, along that automation journey, come to a point where you say, okay, now it would be great that not only I can run this script, but I can give it to somebody, or I can delegate the task that I wrote the script for people in help desk, for the line of business people, for junior admins, stuff like that. Then this is typically the time where ScriptRunner becomes interesting, because we are changing that left picture into something that you see on the right side, which is kind of well organized, where everybody knows, okay, that's the tool for this use case, that's the script for this use case, and I can give it to someone and they know how, I can tell them how they can use it. And so you have a real PowerShell management solution. And one of the main aspects here, of course, is standardization, to make sure, okay, everybody uses the same script, no matter if it's user A or B, or if it's triggered scheduled, or maybe via REST API, if it comes to a particular use case, like, again, onboarding, offboarding, doing things in SharePoint, whatever the use case might be. So standardization is one of the key aspects. Another key aspect is centralization. To achieve standardized processes and also a secure management of the credentials and all what I like to call the PowerShell logistics, like modules, scripts, credentials, and the connections to the systems that you want to manage. Yeah, this is where the centralized approach really helps a lot. And when we talk about delegating tasks that are based on PowerShell scripts, but we want to delegate them to people who are maybe don't even know that PowerShell exists, it has to be easy. And so one of the aspects of using PowerShell together with ScriptRunner is that with each script, we automatically translate that into a web user interface. And so we're doing that in real time. We're looking into the synopsis, we're looking into the parent block. And then based on that, we create something that you see here on the right side, which is just a web interface where really everybody can use it. Nobody needs to know anything about PowerShell. You don't have to worry about, is the module installed over there? I don't have to teach people to use PowerShell. And of course, another very important thing is you don't have to give these people privileged permissions to do something in Office 65 in whatever backend system. Because that's one of the reasons why this delegating topic when it comes to PowerShell quite often is not really done a lot, because you don't want to make everybody obviously global admin in your backend systems. So this is something that we solve as well, which I'll show you also later on. And so because we have the centralized approach, meaning the scripts are always executed centrally, we can provide a centralized dashboard where you can see what kind of scripts have been executed, how often, how long did it take, and if there were some issues with connecting or with runtime or whatever, you can easily analyze that based on the dashboard. And so from the execution of scripts, we can of course support, and we support the interactive approach. One example we just saw on with the screenshot, the user does something. The second one, of course, is the schedule stuff for housekeeping, for creating reports, stuff like that. And the third one is talking about integration, where you can allow other systems to trigger scripts in ScriptRunner via the REST API or via email even. So there could be workflow system, there could be ITSM system, a monitoring system. And so this is how ScriptRunner can become the main hub of all your PowerShell activities in your organization. As I said, it all starts with centralizing the scripts and modules, and which also means that you can, in the background, you can synchronize that with Git, with TFS, or Azure DevOps, of course. The second step is the credential management, which can happen in two ways, also in combination. One is using the Windows credential store, and the other one is using password servers. So we have password server connectors, which allows you to configure and use ScriptRunner and PowerShell in a way that if there is a script that needs to connect to a backend system and the credential is needed, then ScriptRunner is going to ask for this credential in real time in the passwords world. And so to use that during the execution of the script, once the execution is finished, of course, the credential is only still stored in the password server, no credential anywhere near the script, of course, God forbid, and also not stored on any ScriptRunner server, which is also quite interesting if you think about a scenario where you might, in the future, might have multiple instances of ScriptRunner where you definitely don't want to maintain your passwords on each and every box. And when we talk about permissions, that brings us back to this, what I like to call the PowerShell logistics. So PowerShell happens right here in what we call the ScriptRunner zone. So here we have our ScriptRunner server or multiple ScriptRunner servers, and which means only ScriptRunner needs to have access to the scripts, to the modules, to the credentials, and to the systems that you want to manage. This is where PowerShell happens. And on the other side, if you have delegations for users, for third-party systems, stuff like that, they don't need to have any access to these systems, and they don't need to have any privileged permissions, because you decide what these people are allowed to do, or the systems are allowed to do, based on the delegation within ScriptRunner. So you can really define the use cases and the things that are possible. And the things might differ between different roles, different regions, different types of users, of course. And that is something that you can easily manage within ScriptRunner. And so by separating the PowerShell logistics and the delegation part and the triggering of scripts really allows organizations to securely start delegating tasks that are based on PowerShell, but where the people who are triggering and actually triggering the tasks and the scripts don't need to know anything about PowerShell, and they don't need to have the permissions, because it's all done in ScriptRunner, like the execution proxy, as it was called in that graphic just now. And coming back to this simplicity aspect, you have the possibility, of course, also to define and to decide what kind of parameters of your scripts should be visible to the user. So in this example, it's the new team commandlet where you have, I don't know, dozens of parameters, but we only see 3 of them. And that's because that's what was decided in the configuration in ScriptRunner, that only the name of the team, the description, and the members. This is where we need interaction with the user. And that, of course, has 2 big advantages. Number one, it makes it easier for the user, because all the things that happens technically in the background, you don't have to show to the user. And so they don't get confused. They don't get any information here about that they don't need actually. And it gives you the possibility to also manage, again, different scopes, because in this case, you don't even see the possibility to choose or to type in the names of the channels, because that's already predefined. But for other group of people, for other roles with other scopes, you might want to open up, and yes, they can define the channels. They can decide if they want to allow or don't allow Giphies or stuff like that. And you can manage that within ScriptRunner. And the great thing is, for doing this with different scopes and for different scopes and responsibilities, you don't have to make any changes in the underlying script, because in this case with ScriptRunner, you manage that in ScriptRunner on top of your scripts. And so the underlying script that actually does the technical job of creating the team, in this case, that stays exactly the same, no matter what kind of role or differences you might have when it comes to what kind of users is somebody allowed to select, what kind of parameters should be visible. And so step by step, you can delegate all kinds of use cases. And here each tile represents a use case, and we will take a look at a couple of examples so that you can see that in action and what that actually means. And again, coming back to the integration part, you can not only use that for the interactive triggering of scripts, but also, as I mentioned, for the scheduled one, and you can manage and you can allow other third-party systems that are able to create a REST connection to do something with ScriptRunner. All right, so with this, enough slides. I will switch to my demo environment. If you move this over here. Ooh, good old ISE. Oh my God. All right. So what I want to start with, what I wanted to show you first is how that using PowerShell looks from somebody in a help desk team. So here I am in the ScriptRunner portal. And I'm logged in as user Tina, and she's part of a help desk team. And based on the delegation within ScriptRunner, a number of tasks have been delegated to her, and they are related to Azure, to Active Directory, to Exchange, to Teams. And that's exactly where the delegation comes into the picture, where you decide what kind of use cases, what kind of task a person should be allowed to start and to work with. For example, why not? Creating a new VM in Azure. And that could look like this. So here I have this action. If I click on the tile, what I see again is the number of parameters, exactly the one that I've decided to show to the user. What you, for example, can do to make it also easy for the user to understand what this action is actually doing, for example, what this use case is doing, you can create here some advanced descriptions that allows the user to understand, hopefully, okay, what happens here, and they can create an email and stuff like that. And by the way, this is also something that you could do in multi-language. So here I can switch between German and English, and then not only the names of the parameters are changing, but also the description right here. So if you are in a multi-language environment, that might be pretty helpful. And then I have a couple of parameters. One is the name of this VM, of course, and it says it must start with a test in uppercase. And that's because in the script, and I will show you that in a minute, I have a regular expression in the param block that says, okay, this name of a VM has to start with test. And if I'm doing something wrong here, the run button in the lower right corner stays grayed out. So I have to do everything correctly, which is also true, of course, for mandatory parameters and stuff like that. So I could say, okay, I'm very creative here. I create this VM. I can select the operating system. I can select the locations, and I can select the VM sizes. So, and all that here, what we see here is based on the configuration in ScriptRunner, and of course is there to make sure nobody needs to type in EastUS, nobody needs to type in standard D2, V3, whatever. So to avoid all this technical stuff being typed in, typos and stuff like that. And even more important, to make sure nobody is going to spin up the most expensive VM. And then at the end of the month, you have a huge bill and your IT management will fall off the chair. So the idea here is really to set, again, the scope and the possibilities. So in this case, this user is allowed to spin up 3 types of VMs. And so if I have done everything correctly, I can click on the run button. And now in the background, ScriptRunner is going to execute the script with the parameters that I typed in as a user, plus the ones that we will also see that are used in the background, coming back to the standardization approach. Now, while that takes a little bit, let's take a look at another example here, maybe. For example,
Heiko,
yes,
we have a question in the just
Sure.
before you jumped on that, we have a question. So Ben asks, is there an official plugin connection between ScriptRunner and PagerDuty?
So when this question is related to the connection and the REST API, what we provide are actually generic REST API, so which means every third-party system that is able to talk REST and to authenticate against ScriptRunner can be integrated and can be enabled to trigger scripts in ScriptRunner. And even if that's not possible, we have what we call email inbound connector, where we then constantly monitor an IBAP mailbox. And so if this system is able to send emails to this mailbox in a particular formatted way, that's another way of, let's say, sending us a ticket to tell us, run this script with this parameters and this parameter values. And I will show you a few examples, at least one example for this scenario as well. All right, in the meantime, it looks like this Azure VM has been created. So I can just jump back to this one here. So what we see here, this is the result that a user gets back. Now, this is because I decided that I wanted it that way, is pretty technical. So you can manage what kind of information you want to give back to the user once that action has been triggered. And one thing that is possible now, which I think wasn't possible when I did my session in 2020, for example, is to start an additional action with the result that we see here. So what you can see here, I can say, okay, now I created my new VM. That's great, but now I want to see all the existing VMs that I have in my environment. And so within the same window, I can just click on that link, and then another action is being triggered. And that's possible because each action internally has a unique ID, and based on the ID, you can do something like this. And I will show you something that I think is even cooler by having this individual and unique IDs for each and every action. So yeah, so here I can now see, okay, that's the one that I created, and there are a couple of others that are also part of my Azure subscription here. All right. Yeah, going back to
Hey,
another
Heiko,
example.
another
Yes,
little interruption. Just another
sure.
question. So Ben also asks, does ScriptRunner support workflows? For example, for your new VM example,
Yeah.
could it be configured to require approval from someone before the new VM is created?
Not at the moment. That's an interesting question. We have some internal discussions for quite some time to see, because right now, if we have, and we obviously there are many use cases where there are approvals necessary. This is something where our customers right now solve that, for example, as a SharePoint workflow, where then when somebody hits the approval button, then SharePoint talks to ScriptRunner, and again using this connector and this REST API to trigger the execution. Or we have customers with ServiceNow and integration, or with Jira, or with other systems. So that's how it's solved right now. But I think we will have some kind of, I would say, basic workflow, at least an approval process in the foreseeable future. Not tomorrow, but in one of the next releases, because that's something that yeah, we don't want to become a workflow engine, that's for sure, but we want to provide some basic functionality here in the future. Yes.
Sounds good. There's another question. I don't know if you want to handle talking about pricing without reaching out to the sales team. You can handle that later, or?
I will do that at the end. So I will go, because we have a website
Great.
where we explain how all the licensing works. So I will keep that for the end of the session.
Great.
It's not forgotten. I have it on my list anyway. So we will talk about that. That's for sure. Okay, another example, the one that we just looked. I showed you the screenshot in the presentation is, creating this team. So here again, a couple of parameters. Name of the team, description, and then members. I can select here. And again, that might be the list of all users, but maybe for some other scopes, it might be only particular users that are possible. Again, I could have naming conventions based on regular expressions being used here. And so click on the run button again, and the script is executed in the background. Now, while that works, I want to show you something else, because I already mentioned this, that each action has a unique ID, and that means that, and allows you to take each action and make it part of an existing website. For example, maybe an existing self-service portal. So here I just have a static website, and I integrated this action to create this VM in Azure with the same parameters, and of course with the same security settings. So I have to be logged in as a user who is allowed to do that. And this is really the use case, or the way to use ScriptRunner, where somebody who works with something like this, number one, doesn't need to know anything about PowerShell. Plus, here they don't even need to know anything about ScriptRunner, because it's really just an input form, doing something, getting a result back. And one of the classic examples here, of course, is things like Active Directory password reset, right? So here I have an example where, number one, I can select an OU, and then based on the OU, I can see the users on this OU, and then here I could reset the password for this guy here. And if I'm selecting another OU, I will see the users from this OU. So this is kind of a cascading query, and I will show you later on how that works. And this is here to, of course, guide the user through a step-by-step approach. Here it's just 2 steps, but in other cases it might be 3 or 4. Maybe the first selection could be select a vSphere server and a VM, and then I see all the snapshots of a VM, for example. So the goal here, again, make it easy for the user and give you the possibility to manage what is actually visible to the user. And if, for example, the scope of a user is not, okay, he can do something, or she can do something for everybody, then down here, the OU is already pre-selected, and the only chance I have is to work with my users in the UK OU. The UK OU. So again, depending on the scope, it might be, people might be able to select OUs or subscriptions or whatever the objects might be, or they present it with exactly the things that they are responsible for, and you can make sure that they are not messing around with things that they shouldn't touch, because that's what you manage in ScriptRunner. And that also, for example, applies to things like out of office. This is another typical example for self-service scenarios where you allow people to select maybe from their own team. And then they have notification templates. And because we're in the background, we have a date time picker, we translate that automatically into something like this. So I just pick and choose what I need to, and then I can run it. And we can just do that right here to see what happens. So these are, let's say, the two ways to actually trigger scripts. Now, all these activities, because we have a centralized approach, all these activities are documented in our report engine, our dashboard. And now I'm switching the role, because here we used the portal as a help desk person. And as a help desk person, I can run all these actions that I've delegated to, and I can also go back to reports of things that I've done previously, because maybe I created a nice little Active Directory report yesterday, and I want to go back to this. But if I'm using the portal as an administrator, as ScriptRunner administrator, I have many more possibilities. For example, including the reports, and the reports for all the executions. So here I can see, okay, this user Tina, she started this action to create a new team. I can click on that. I can see the result that also the user just saw. I can see all the parameters. And here, for example, we see there are dozens of parameters which the user didn't see, because we said as an organization, these are our defaults. That's how teams should be created, and only the things that really needs the interaction, that's what we saw as a user. And all of that is documented here. And of course, especially if maybe things go wrong, you can filter, you can say, okay, something went wrong here. I wanted to analyze that. What was the reason here? And then, okay, there was some problem with some parameters, for example. So that's available to you because, again, everything is done centrally. And so no matter if it's triggered interactively by user or maybe scheduled, like what we see here, or via the REST API, everything becomes part of that dashboard and gives you all the necessary information that you typically need. Now, okay, now let's take a look at the configuration. So how do we get there to what I just showed you? And it all starts with the scripts, right? So we need to have a script to start using ScriptRunner and to start automating and delegating and standardizing that stuff. So here I have the list of all my scripts that are available on this machine. And but as I mentioned earlier on, we have a lot of scripts available on our GitHub repo. If you go to github.com/scriptrunner/action-packs, we have, as I said, 1,600 something scripts that you can download, that you can use right away. If you take a look at these scripts, you can also see how we write the scripts, which is basically based on the best practice by Microsoft. And here, for example, you can already notice that we have this multi-language support, for example, for the parameters. So you can have multi-language descriptions. So depending on what the user has, to which language he or she is using, and these parameters are displayed and the descriptions are displayed. And we have the param block, and we have the code, and then down here, and I will show you a few examples about this. For example, here we have a hash table that allows you to define what the user should see. So the thing that we just saw, this little HTML table that came back when the Azure VM was created or the team was created. This is something that you can easily manage with these variables in your script. Now, as I said, we need to have some scripts. And so here we have, for example, a script here. This is also related to Active Directory. What I can do, and this is something that also wasn't available when I had this session in 2020, is you can start browsing through the code You can also check out a script. You can make changes to it. Make some stupid changes here. You can check in it. You can check it in again. You can hopefully type in some commit message that makes sense, and you can take a look at the version history. You can make a diff here to see what changed between the previous version and the latest version, and you can even go back to a older version, and you can see where this script's actually being used. So that's really, really helpful to make maybe some changes on the fly. But of course, we have two ways of organizations using and writing scripts. One is they already have their pipeline going on in Git or in Azure DevOps. And then, of course, they would typically not use that because this is kind of undermining their centralized approach. Other organizations like to do that because that's their starting point of working on scripts with multiple people or maybe even with multiple teams, because inside of ScriptRunner, that's true for all objects, we have the concept of ownership. So whatever you create, and now we are creating a script, you can decide, should that be an object that is available for all ScriptRunner admins, or should that be only available for a particular team? So the idea here is to make sure that, for example, the Exchange team is not messing around with the Azure scripts or the Azure credentials or or the actions or delegations and stuff like that. So having one ScriptRunner instance, but being more granular with what kind of administrative possibilities do I have as a ScriptRunner admin. And that's really helpful, especially if you have multiple teams running a ScriptRunner server and you want to separate their scripts, credentials, and so on. And of course, you can also import the scripts here. Again, you have a link to our GitHub repo where you can directly get scripts from there. And I think that's really, really pretty helpful. So that's step one, so to speak. We need to have some scripts, right, to start doing things. The second part is we need to have credentials. So when it comes to the credentials, there are two ways to manage that, as I stated out earlier. One is they are stored in the local Windows credential store, or they are stored in a password server. And as right now we support 3 password servers: Pleasant, Psychotic, and CyberArk. In my case, I have a Pleasant server running locally, and instead of having the real credential here, it's just the ID. So whenever that credential is used, ScriptRunner is going to ask the password server for this credential. And as you can see, for example, if you're using PowerShell 7, managing Linux and macOS machines, you could also have SSH keys as credentials here, for example. And so, of course, and it can be a mix of all these different possibilities. And having these credentials already centralized here is, of course, an important aspect when it comes to the secure usage of PowerShell. And then what comes next is, what kind of systems do you actually want to manage? And here we're talking about targets. And so targets can be any systems that you can reach out to via a PowerShell module: Active Directory, Exchange, VMware, and of course, cloud services, stuff like that. You could even combine targets into collections, which help you, especially if you're doing things for like a housekeeping, where you don't want to select 25 or 120 servers manually. You could put them into a collection. Later on, you always use the collection, and you maintain if servers are being removed or added. You only have to manage that here centrally in the targets. And so the target, for example, also brings into the picture again the credentials. So here for Active Directory, I'm saying, okay, this is the domain controller that I want to manage, I want to connect to, and this is the credential that I'm going to use. So the logistics for that is already managed here. So later on in your scripts, you don't have to worry about that. You're selecting a target for the use case, and then ScriptRunner knows, okay, that's the machine that we have to connect to, and that's the credential. If that would be an Exchange or maybe an Office 65 example here, let me take a look at this one. You have even more possibilities. For example, especially helpful for cloud targets because there are always limitations about how many sessions in parallel are possible. You can define these limits, and then you can decide what should happen if these limits are reached, which means we could start queuing the execution until a connection becomes available again, instead of just throwing an error and stopping the execution. And because here it's over 65, you can also decide which kind of services you want to use with this target, which means you could have a target where you say, okay, this is for Exchange Online, for Teams, and for SharePoint. Or you could say, no, I have dedicated targets, maybe only for Teams, and I have another one for Exchange Online. And of course, you could then use the certificate-based authentication here as well. And so this is, again, comes back to the targets and to the logistic question and solution, where we can say, okay, now we have the scripts, we have the modules, we have the credentials, and we have the targets. And now we can start building what we call actions, which are the actual use case.
Hey, Heiko.
Yes.
You up for another question?
Sure.
So Ted asks, is there a code management view so you can roll back to a previous version or activate a new version via change management?
So what you can do with what I showed you here with the script management is you can go back to a previous version. So I could say, okay, I want to, I think I have an example here. So you could go back to a previous version. So we keep a history of scripts, but it is, again, not meant to be a code management system like Git or Azure DevOps or TFS. So there are possibilities to do that, and because we're keeping the scripts, we have a particular folder structure where these scripts are stored based on their timestamp and stuff like that. For example, if you're looking for a, let's say, full-blown versioning solution, that's not what that is meant to be. It's really for starting to work on scripts together, and also, of course, to go back to previous versions if necessary. Then you can use that. But for bigger organizations, we typically see that at one point in time, customers are going to use things like Git or Bitbucket or these kinds of solutions.
So Ted that's great. Yeah. Ted has a follow-up question. Is the target label kept in ScriptRunner, or can you use a defined label in AD?
You can manage the labels in ScriptRunner. We're pretty heavy working with tags and labels. So that's possible in the targets as well. Yes. And I think just looking at the chat, there's another question.
Yeah, there's one more question.
Haha, dark mode.
Dark mode. Always a good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question. I wish I could say yes today, but it's going to be available, I think, in the version that comes up, I think in July. We have 2 people since last year working heavily on UX design, and this is one of the first things that they came up with. And it will not take too long that this will be available. Yeah. So right now it's not there. So it's like you can see here, you can make some changes when it comes to the color on top, and you could have your own logo here of your organization if you want. But dark mode right now, no. But in a couple of weeks, the answer will be yes.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, decent dark mode, always a good thing. Absolutely. So we were at the point, so we have all the logistics together, and now we can start building use cases. For example, creating an Azure VM or the things that we saw. So if I look at into this action that we just saw, number one, I can take a look at what kind of objects this use case is kind of bringing together. And if you look at the action, it's like a bracket to all different things, like what target are we going to manage? What is the credential? Do we have library scripts involved? Something that is part of the ScriptRunner solution, where we have kind of differentiate 3 different kind of scripts: the main script, library scripts and query scripts. Library scripts means here you have a bunch of functions that I'm using, and I can map to each action where I need it. This is there to create this nice little HTML table. I have my actual script. I have a bunch of queries here, and I have some delegations. Now, how does that look like if I'm going into this action in edit mode? So here I have the action to create a new VM. And as I said, with all parameters, you can say, okay, is this something that the user should see, or is this predefined? And here, resource group name is defined. And then I said, hide it from input form. I always want to have static IP addresses. Yes. And then it's hidden from the input form. So this is how you can manage what the user is seeing. And then we saw several lists where we could pick and choose locations and VM sizes. And of course, the reason why we do that is that because what we typically don't want, that we run this kind of use cases, and then somebody could spin up the Godzilla Beast VM, as Markus Inovich, I think, called them, and then whatever. And number one, because I would need to know the naming convention, and then maybe bad things will happen. That's why we have these queries. And of course, we have queries and we have these different scopes, right? So because for one group of people, it would be okay to maybe only spin up, select 2 types of VMs instead of the 3 that we just saw when I started this action earlier on. So here in this action, now I just changed the query, and now I can only select 2 VMs. And now I could say, okay, this is the action I'm going to delegate to the people who should, by default, only be able to spin up these 2 types of VMs, which brings us to the either AD groups or Azure AD groups, where you then say, okay, these are the people, these are kind of the recipients and the people who should be able to run these actions in the portal or via the portal widget in some kind of maybe predefined self-service portal. And so for the other use case, if we look for the one that we also triggered just now, you will see that, of course, the theme is exactly the same. Here, the out of office management, I'm going into the edit mode, and I can see, again, the parameters. I can see that we have these lists here. And for example, this was a query, a scripted query that comes back with my Office 365 mailboxes. And you might have seen that this list was there immediately. And that's because these queries can be scheduled. So you can say, okay, if I know that creating this list can take 30 minutes, 30 seconds, or maybe longer, I don't want the user to wait until the list is populated. So that's why you can, that's true for all queries. You can say, okay, this is scheduled so that if the user opens up this action, immediately the information becomes available. And then you can say, okay, and this query should run every 5 minutes because maybe there is a lot of things happening and you want to update this very, very frequently. In other cases, maybe it's okay to do that only once a day or every 2 hours or stuff like that. And again, we have a couple of actions of parameters that we didn't see because we said we hide this from the input form. And of course, especially for things like creating a report, this is a good example for saying, okay, this should be a scheduled process. So you could say, okay, besides the interactive usage, you could say, okay, this is something that should be executed every Friday. And if I want to, I can also automatically send that via email to somebody. Or I could make this something that the user can decide if they want to have it via email or not. Another example that I can show you right here, and maybe also to show you the direct relation between these actions and the scripts in the background. Maybe that's a good idea to maybe go into this as well. So here I have this action that is creating an Active Directory report, and I have a parameter here that allows me to say, do you want to also receive this email, this report via email? And I think the script for that Could be this one. I'm not sure. Let me see. I think it's not. Okay, I can't find it right now. Oh. Let's take a look at this. Let's take a look at the action and the report. This one here. Get 80 users. CSV.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt you again.
Yes, sure.
So are you using, are you using a VS Code plugin for the web in the web for editing?
No, this is, I think this is, I think what's it called, the Monaco editor right now?
Yep, that's VS Code. Awesome. Looks great.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, Monaco is what they built for the web, and then
yeah, true.
part.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that's a good point, by the way, because we also have, and I'm not afraid to show it. We also have still a plugin for the ISE that allows you. Oh,
it's all good. I apologize.
To do the check in, check out. So you have kind of the same functionality. And again, also there is some good news. There's some light at the end of the tunnel, and it's not a train. And there will be a plugin for the VS Code as well. So excellent. That's something we're working on. So that's something that will happen pretty soon.
Good to know. Okay, thank you.
Of course. So while we're here, why not doing it, showing it maybe just right here? So why not? Why not? Good old ISE. Whoops. All right. So what I wanted to show you is, so this is the action that creates a kind of a simplified Active Directory report, and we can say we want to get this report via email as well. And the way it's being done is, so here we have the switch parameter, and the way that is being done here is that I mentioned this hash table, this SRX environment hash table, and for example, that can tell us. Don't do that, Heiko. For example, who started this action? Who clicked on that tile? That, for example, can help to then identify, okay, what is this user's email address? And then we use the send mail message to say, okay, we sent this to the recipient, which is started with the information of the person who clicked on the tile. Then we got the email address from Active Directory or from Exchange. And that's the information that then being used to send out the report. And then if that's happening and the user received this email, and then we have the report right here, for example, that can be, that shows the Active Directory. So what that means is that you can use that, for example, to do something like on demand, sending an email. You could also use that for client-side activities where you could say, okay, I have a user, or I have use cases where people should be able to clean their local Teams cache. Because there's still, at least I don't know about it, there's still no button in Teams where people can just press and say, okay, now the Teams cache is deleted. Instead, you could provide an action. And as you can see here, Teams is open on this client. Now here I'm on a Windows 10 box. And again, I have a little description here, what this action will do. And then I click on the run button. And now in the background, ScriptRunner again is executing a script. And because we know, in this case, not the user, but the IP address of that user, comes back with a fancy result message. Maybe that's a little bit over the top, but anyway. So this is another example where we use some specific information, jumping back to my server here, where we have a script. And in this case, this was for Windows management. Let me just see where it is. Jumping. Here it is. Yeah. Should have clicked on VS Code. Anyway, so here, this is another information that is very useful for this use case, because here we have this started IP information that which we translate into the host name. And then given that PowerShell remoting is possible, we use the invoke command and then connect to this machine and run that commandlets to clean the local Teams cache. So these are all things that can help you with all kinds of different use cases where you want to kind of react on things like who started something, from which machines something started. And there are additional parameters here that you can use to control the behavior of your scripts. That's let's say the basic idea of that possibilities. And of course, what you also can do is, because I already mentioned that PowerShell 7, you can switch each action, given that you have the module installed that you need and it's ready for PowerShell 7. You can switch each action to PowerShell 7. You can switch the targets also to PowerShell 7. So again, you can have a mix of a scenario, which is typically what we see right now. Just can't find it here, but it's part of the configuration. And you can also test these targets. And here you can also say if you want to make this test based on PowerShell 7 or on Windows PowerShell. So as we are in this transition phase where I have to say, I would say most of my customers are still Windows PowerShell based, mainly at least. But as more and more people are going to switch to PowerShell 7, of course, this is something that is obviously mandatory so that it can be used. And what I want to cover as well is the queries that I mentioned. So the queries are there to define and to make sure the users are selecting the right things and are able to, and you enable you to make sure, okay, people are seeing only what they are allowed to see. And these queries can be as simple as a static list, as this one, for example, where this is what we already saw, where on the left side, that's what the user sees. And on the right side, that's what we're technically using when we're running the scripts in the background. And this concept of having these two types of information is true for all kinds of queries. And these queries can be basic Active Directory queries. It can be Azure MS Graph query based, where I also can show you a simple example here, by the way. I have a machine running in Azure. This is one of my ScriptRunner machines running in Azure. And I have some queries here. One, for example, who is based on Custo. So I'm in the resource query area here. So which means if you use these queries, you're not only getting back one single value. You could say, okay, I get a whole JSON object back, and then I can use that to process that in my scripts. And the nice thing about that is that building up the connection and all that, again, the logistics are managed by ScriptRunner, and the only thing that you do here is you define your Custo query about the objects that you want to have back in your query. But it also could be just let's say a simple graph query, where here I'm coming back with a room mailbox, where this is really just the graph request. The idea is to simplify the work with graph and all the things that you can do with Azure, because of course you could do all that with a scripted query, but that will, number one, be more complex, and number two, it will take much longer, because one of the real benefits working with the graph here is speed, right? So you can use that. And as you can see, you could even run the ScriptRunner natively just in Azure, and also with Azure authentications and stuff like that. And you can have, as I mentioned earlier on, you could say, okay, and I have queries that maybe I know they take a little bit longer, and that's why I want to schedule them. So I have always a cached version of the list that comes maybe from a database or from an ERP system or stuff like that. And you just say here, in my case, okay, this query runs every 2 hours, and here I can take a look at the current state of that query, of that cache that this query creates. And if I need an update now, I could do this as well, or I can just have another interval that I'm using with this query. And of course, also here, if we go back to an Active Directory one.
As you go back to that one, you might want to
Yes.
field a couple of questions from Richard.
Yes. Okay, can ScriptRunner connect Azure Key Vault? We have via scripts, yes. You might have seen when I showed you the credentials here that we have something written here. There is some PowerShell secret management implementation experimental. And experimental means this is something that was based on an early implementation of Microsoft of the secrets management, which they changed later on. So we have to modify our implementation so it fits to the secret management. And through the secret management, of course, you can have access to Azure Key Vault, but all to other password providers where this community already contributed a number of, I think for 1Password and for KeePass and stuff like that. So, but this is right now, this is a work in progress. What we see with customers using Azure Key Vault is really doing and pulling out the credentials via the script that they use in ScriptRunner. So not via the password server connectors that we provide, where we have these 3 right now, but doing it natively with the script and the underlying PowerShell module. Okay, question 2, with Microsoft deprecation Azure and online, can you translate current scripts automatically to Microsoft Graph? Automatically, no. We, as you can see right now in our action packs, for example, wherever possible, we are switching to the graph technology step by step. So you will see more and more examples also here using the graph, also inside the targets as Microsoft goes along there. What we experience right now still is that the way the graph is, or the state of the things you can do with the graph with PowerShell on the Microsoft side still looks like a work in progress as well. But as this is the way to go for Microsoft, we will definitely also support that, and we will see more and more use cases where the graph also becomes part of the default configuration within ScriptRunner. Yes. And so for example, if we go back here to the target, Exchange Online, of course, you can still see, I think it's still here. Yeah, but of course, the way to go is using XOV2. And so we are also updating this target configuration step by step as Microsoft is moving towards other technologies. So this is something that we are constantly updating along the lines. All right. So query. So we saw something. I showed you the VM in Azure, the graph, and one thing that I wanted to show you is the example with an Active Directory.
Sorry, we got Ted just wanted, is there a limit to nesting the scripts?
Not that I know of. No. So you meaning if you
go as deep as you want?
You're starting a script and then you're running a next one and connecting to another system. I guess this might be the scenario. What becomes helpful for these scenarios, by the way, is that of course we talked about this. And I showed you these credentials here. And of course, you have use cases where, okay, you start with doing something in AD, and then you want to do something in Exchange, then you want to do something in SharePoint. And again, here, the query management helps you to make sure you don't have to have credentials anywhere near your scripts. I'm just trying to find this example here. Bear with me. I think, Jesus, here it is. So this is an example where I have, but in this case, it's actually one script, but it could be, of course, also multiple scripts. But here I have a script that starts target-wise on an Exchange server, but then I also want to do things in AD. And so what I'm doing here, I have a PS credential parameter in my script, and I'm feeding it based on the credential that I have stored in ScriptRunner. And so this allows you to have a script that does things on multiple machines, where you have the need to have multiple credentials. And again, instead of doing these things inside of your script, you're just defining a PS credential, and then you're still using the credential management from ScriptRunner that might be then related and connected to a password server. So everything is stored in a secure way. All right. Going back here, maybe hopefully I get this to run here, because I wanted to show you again this example of this splitting feature and having queries where you get a bunch of properties back instead of having 10 queries to get back 10 properties like name and address and manager and stuff like that. You can just have one query. And that's something actually that we didn't have when I had my session in 2020, which really simplifies and the way you use queries, and you can limit the number of queries that you need to pull out the data that you want, so that you can feed your script and the things that you want to do with it. The last thing I want to jump to is, again, to the kind of reports monitoring part of things. So we already looked at the reports, which shows you the history of things that happened. Besides that, we also have a real-time monitor. So let's say I have something going on, and maybe here I have an action that takes a little bit, which is the one that is going to create this Active Directory report. I can see in real time what happens on my machines. I could even stop the execution if necessary. And if I would have multiple machines, I would see that. If I would have queued actions, I mentioned that in combination with this cloud targets, where you might have limitations when it comes to the number of parallel sessions that you can create. If that would be a case, then you would see these actions here as well. They would be marked here in this bluish color. So this is the real-time overview of the things that happened. And then there is a third way of looking at ScriptRunner and the things that's being done, which is the statistics part, where you could, and this is more than related to typically, management questions like, why do we even automate? What time and money do we save? And then you could say, okay, in each action, you can define the number of minutes that you save compared to doing things manually, and then we calculate the number of executions. and then you can correlate that to an hourly wage, and then you're coming up with a number that might be maybe just a ballpark number, or it might be a precise number, but it at least gives you an indication about what's happening, how often, how many tasks are maybe also being executed. So sometimes, especially the one here on the left side, can also be interesting information if you expect a particular action to be executed 20 times a day, and it doesn't even appear on this chart, and then this might be a starting point to investigate why that's actually the case. Yeah, one more thing that I want to show you, because we talked about the connector, and the easiest way, the simplest way, again, it's the ISE. Oh my God!
I just want to say, sorry, before you, yeah, that whole thing of figuring out when does it make sense to automate, right? That's a good way to answer that question. Is it worth automating? That's how I read that.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. And yeah, as we talked about this REST API as well, here we see an example, and this is actually a script that comes with the installation. So if you download our trial, another link I'm going to paste into the chat later on. Oh, yeah, is a script that allows you to, here I am on a remote machine, to trigger an action. So here, I have two things need to fit in order to make this work. I need to start this script with a user who is part of the ScriptRunner configuration, and I need to address an action that is existing. And if I'm running that, what happens now is that with this script that I have here, we're creating the JSON data, sending it to ScriptRunner, telling ScriptRunner, run this action, local add two values, and then we have two parameter names, and we have two parameter values, and we're getting the result back. So this is kind of a basic test to, number one, to see, can I connect to my ScriptRunner server, and do I have the right authentication to be able to trigger a script? And for example, this script, in my case here, is actually implemented inside of a PRTG monitoring system that is being used whenever a sensor detects an error, and then this PRTG system is triggering the script with the information that is configured here in the PRTG system that tells us that ScriptRunner, okay, run this action to, number one, for example, push a message into a Teams channel to let admins know there's a problem with some services, for example, and then of course running the script that is solving the problem, like for example restarting a service or changing configurations in VMs or stuff like that. So that's where the connectors come into the picture, which we see right here. And as I said, they are generic connectors. So as long as the source system is able to talk REST and it can authenticate, you can integrate that system with ScriptRunner. And so I'm allowing the system to connect, and it has to authenticate. That's how we check if the system is allowed to trigger the action that they want to. And then the execution happens more or less the same way as it would be a scheduled one or interactive one. But the trigger is, of course, based on the web service connector, which also then, of course, is documented in the report, because from the thing that we just saw, we can see here that it got triggered by the web service connector. We can see also the values that came from that source system. So technically, once we execute a script, it's the same as it would be interactively, just the trigger is different. The source of the trigger is different. All right, I think we're already over time. Is that true?
We're really close, but also Mark sent me a question. Not in the general chat, and Mark asks, are there any examples of user-facing creation or user-facing GUI creation, like question buttons for the user to click on, things like that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so right now the goal of our solution really is to create this user interface that we see here fully automatically, controlled by the parameters and the synopsis and the queries. So for example, things like I would like to have a particular action in maybe 2 columns because I have a lot of parameters, like for this one here. This is something we will see. It's in the making actually, but there is no form editor right now. So and we know that other solutions provide that, and it's kind of a, I would say it's 2 sides to it, right? Because right now our customers love the fact that they don't have to worry about doing and building forms or letting their users building forms, because that might open up another box that maybe can cause some issues. But we see the demand, and that's why there will be some form editor being available in one of the future releases. But the main goal until today really is to make this creation of the interface, no matter if it's done via the portal or, as we saw, via the portal widgets here, as easy as possible, which typically really is based on the script. And if you have, as I mentioned, if you have parameters with or parameter sets or parameter particular values that you want to make sure that are being used, then that's something that, of course, that you can control via the script. That's typically the key right now.
Cool. So 2 more questions, and then I think we'll wrap. So Ben asks, will you be at PSConf EU?
I probably will not be there because I think I'm going to be on leave. But we, as ScriptRunner, we are there. We are one of the sponsors, and at least 2 of my colleagues will be in the nice city of Vienna.
Cool.
So we will be there. Well, we will bring all kinds of goodies and new versions. Some of the things that I talked about that we will be bringing into solution will already be there end of June when the PSConf EU will take place. And we also will talk about our vNext version. There is a larger project, an ongoing project for quite some time already, and there will be some interesting announcements during PSConf.
Great. So I have a last question. So do you like Angus Young?
Yes, yes. Why do you come up with this question? Does it have to do with the t-shirt here? Yeah, this is kind of my stage outfit. I'm always yeah, AC/DC awesome. Is one of my first and favorite bands. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask that. So yeah, I think we can, if you're okay with that, thank you for presenting tonight. Awesome information. Great presentation. And Dan asks, what's AC/DC? So I'm going to block him from the channel.
Yeah. Okay. He's in the wrong. He's in the wrong event, I think. Yeah.
Exactly.
So maybe just as
let's ask some questions. Do you have some questions you want to ask and give out some prizes?
Yes. So before we do that, so just as a, if you say, okay, this was quite interesting, and you would like to test the stuff yourself, go on our website. You can download the software. And test everything that I'm talked about to you today, or you can reach out to me. We can make another individual session. So if you have some specific use cases that you want to discuss, and yeah, so let's get to the most important part, right? To find out who is going to win this Amazon gift cards. There are 2 of them. So I will ask 2 questions, and I will take a look at the chat to see, okay, who answers with the right answer quickest. And the first question would be, in which country ScriptRunner is based? All right. I think Jesse. That's the first. Congratulations. So I would ask you to get in touch with me via email. I think I pasted the email address already in the chat, but I will paste it in again. So just reach out to me so that our marketing guys can get in touch with you. Yeah, Deutschland. Yeah, correct. But too late. Yeah, so that would be great. Jesse, just get in touch with me. So I will forward your email address and then you will receive this Amazon gift card. And the second question would be, how many password servers do we support at the moment? All right. Wow, that was quick. So who was the first one? Michael.
Awesome. Lots of people paying attention. I like that.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. That's okay. 6. Okay, that's the future. So somebody talked about the future version. There will, I'm sure at one point we will have 6, but right now there are actually 3. So that's the right answer. So again, Michael, get in touch with me via email. That would be great. And so we can send the gift card code to you. Awesome.
Thank you, Heiko. That was great. Great presentation. Really cool product.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I'm going to have some questions for you offline about some ideas I have.
Okay, that's even better. Yeah, let's
I wish
talk.
I could make. I wish we could both make the PS Conf in EU, but maybe sometime in the future.
Yeah, will you be there?
No, I won't be traveling. I didn't
Yeah.
travel to the PS Conf in or one of the conferences for PowerShell on the West Coast either, but I've been following all that good stuff. Thanks everybody for joining tonight, really, or my time tonight. And Heiko, what is it, like 2 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Time to get up.
I really appreciate you joining. If anybody has
fun,
anybody else who would like to recommend some speakers or whatnot, that'd be great. If not, we'll see you next month. And thanks everybody for joining. We'll catch you later.
All right. Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.